Hello, everyone. My name is Israel Figueroa Jr., and today I'm going to be speaking about my capstone project. My project was a podcast that was called The Status Quo, a podcast for women by men. So, my catchphrase for my project was a podcast for women by a man. And the reason that this is my catch line, my headline, is I thought it was important and not only unique for a man who is very partial to these challenges that women face, but that thought it was necessary for a man to share their perspective on the challenges that has been shared with him through the conversations with multiple women in his life. The purpose of my podcast was to invite people into a space where conversations could happen freely about the challenges that women still face on today. And a big part that I wanted to emphasize is whether men were aware of these challenges and if they cared enough to act on it. I also wanted a space where other people could perhaps relate and chime in onto the conversations and the topics that were being mentioned in my podcast episodes. That way, we could contribute to the fight that women still rage on today. So, in terms of the focuses of my project, I had three major focuses. Number one was to bridge the gap, and more importantly, the informational gap. This podcast would create a medium slash channel where women could provide perspective on what life is like as a woman. But not only could women do it, I, as a man, could also provide insight that I have gained from conversations with women in my life to be able to mediate or kind of connect the two channels. Number two, I wanted to have authentic conversations. When addressing these sort of challenges and I would say inequalities in society, we have to have authentic, difficult, and vulnerable conversations with each other. And these conversations need to be around the difficulties that women experience on the day-to-day basis and how men impact those experiences, whether men are aware or if not. Number three was my target audience. And this, I wanted to focus on women and men, as they both bear responsibilities in progressing forward. Now, I wanted to get to men, as I feel like that's the population that I really wanted to connect to and emphasize in making a change. But I am also aware through the conversations that I've had with women that women can also do more for themselves and for their co-peers. And I wanted to make sure I didn't miss out on that target audience. So when it comes to my purpose, or how I like to call it my why, the biggest thing was my mom. This project would have never came to fruition if I never took the time and the and I approached my mother with an empathetic way. To have learned that she had many struggles, many hardships, and they have been ignored by certain men in her life, was really saddening to hear. That is why I wanted to speak on this topic as a man, because I believe it is our responsibility to empower the woman in our life as their struggles at times come to the benefit of men. Sometimes the reason we're so set up is at the expense of women. And during this conversation with my mother, I've always wondered why fellow men never took on these conversations, um, especially when they speak about their mothers in high regard. It seemed that we needed to hold each other accountable as men. Is we speak so highly of our moms, we care so much for our moms, but do we actually do we actually care that much? Are we there having those conversations with our moms, or the woman in our life, sisters, girlfriends, fiancés, um, talking about what can we do for you? What kind of things happen on your day to day life that impact you that maybe I'm not aware of or maybe I take for granted. So that was a big way that I wanted my project to demonstrate is how mass media can be used to impact society, even in a small way. So when it comes to primary research, I conducted a survey from several different racial backgrounds of women and men to hear their opinions and attitudes about how men perceive the struggles that women face in today's world. So how I did this was my brother attends the University of Texas, and he has a great connection with the Greek society overseeing president, council member. So I asked him if he could put me in touch with all the Greek presidents um, at UT of Austin, and if I could be able to poll all the members at their chapter meetings. And fortunately, I was able to do that and I've had over 800 individuals participate in this survey, and that was a phenomenal takeaway for me. So just to reference some of the examples on this survey, 88% of women of the 400 women that were surveyed had experienced a sexual harassment at work, and no disciplinary actions were taken, simply because men labeled those actions or that sexual harassment experience as boys being boys, or you might have misunderstood what was being said or what was said to you. Also, 93 of men surveyed had never spoken to a woman about life as a woman or how the world or rules affect women in their day-to-day lives. 97% of women also believe that men are either not educated enough or choose not to care about the issues that women face. And to me, that was very deflating, because it just emphasized and kind of reinforced my own takeaways from my mom's conversations that most women experience the same things that my mom did, that she was ignored, that men sometimes downplay the issues and the challenges that women face on a day-to-day basis because they don't understand or they choose not to understand. And my other five secondary sources range from books, articles, and studies, just to name a couple. An article called "This Is Still a Man's World," a couple studies, "A Woman in a Man's World," another study, "Why is it so difficult to reduce gender inequality in male-dominated higher education organizations?" A study called "Gender Willingness to Lead: Does the Gender Composition of Teams Matter?" That's basically talking about how, um, if we have women assigned leader or more women in leadership, you know, does that affect how a team kind of comes together? And then ultimately, which is my personal favorite piece of research, was The Invisible Woman, which is a book that kind of uses stats to kind of paint a picture of how today's world and how really the world always has been in favor for men and put a woman at disadvantages. So when it comes to my podcast episodes, there were four. Podcast number one, or installment one, was a introduction into the podcast purposes. Then I had installment two, which is I spoke on why I started this podcast and why men and women need to listen to each other, but mainly men. Installment three was I had a special guest, Madeline, who has played a large role in part of this project, and I wanted to have some conversations with her. And installment four was just me kind of signing off, and just kind of leaving my audience with some questions and some call to actions. So some takeaways that I had was community ties. And the biggest thing is that women generally feel that men do not care about the struggles in the world, that they don't see them as equal. And that was something that was really saddening to hear, but emphasize that that's a change that we as men need to work on. The second was breaking the mold. 7% of men surveyed did say that they were aware of challenges that women face and they were actually wanted to do more for them. And to me, that number is laughable. It's insulting to women. Um, and that is just something that, as the new generation of men, we have to look beyond ourselves and look about the people that are also in our world that we can impact through our actions. And then it's not always about impacting ourselves through a direct way. My third takeaway was a turning point. The world, especially this country of the United States, is becoming more and more extreme. Um, and I truly do believe the next 50 years will determine the status of women, minorities, and just humans in general. How the world comes together and addresses these social injustices and just the challenges that we as people face. That will determine the next 50 years that many generations will have to live with and deal with. And my last takeaway, which is one of the most important things, was although my podcast was a tiny project, very, very nuanced, very, very rookie-ish, I would say, I made an impact. I was told by a listener who I asked to listen in, um, that they had recommended to a friend because they thought what I was saying was important. And while I'm not no expert or I'm not someone I guess of a high importance, they said it was important, um, that we as people take the opportunities to use mass media, um, to share messages. So all it takes is one to move thousands was kind of my takeaway. And my conclusion was, my project has taught me a lot, and I had major takeaways. One, when it comes to actually executing the podcast, was an actual project is hard. I had a plan, and it didn't go according to how I wanted it. from having 3 guests lined up to only having 1 interview, to learning, conversations are a lot harder to have, especially when you're mic'd up and you're on a Zoom, that those can be difficult and kinda awkward, but it really signifies that you learn and you grow from each experience, and the next time you're better at it, and just to embrace that. That's how life is, and that's how you get better at anything. But ultimately, my greatest takeaway is that conversations lead to actions. Having and listening to these conversations make me wanna continue to do more for the woman in my life, but to also the woman around me. I can only imagine how many other people might feel this way and might start doing more for their woman in their life. But yes, this was a great project, and I am glad I was able to have Professor Osaka. Um, Thank you so much for your help, and I hope you enjoy. Bye.